The thing that Provincetown really demands of you if you want to stay there and make a life there is that you are authentically yourself, no matter who that is. And that, I was really drawn to Provincetown in particular because I saw other people doing that. And I say this in the book, but I stupidly didn't really realize that I was doing that for myself. So living in Provincetown has allowed me to be the queerest, loudest, most fully realized version of myself.
Hey there, this is Julie Wake, the Executive Director of the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. Welcome to Season 7 of the Creative Exchange Podcast, a production of the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. In each episode, we spotlight the creative voices that shape our communities. We hope each conversation sparks a journey of discovery and inspiration. Can we say a big thank you to our Creative Exchange sponsors? William Ravis Real Estate, the official real estate company of the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. South Shore Playhouse Associates, also known as the Melody Tent. John K. and Thurza F. Davenport Foundation. The Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod. Wauquasit Resort and Golf Club. The Cape Cod 5 Foundation. The Cape Cod Foundation. The Donald C. McGraw Foundation. And Eastern Bank. We just want to say thank you so much for making it possible to do this podcast and support the arts. Welcome to the Creative Exchange Podcast, produced by the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. In this episode, I had the opportunity to sit down with Rebecca Orchant. Rebecca is the co-owner of the Pop and Dutch Market, where they sell sandwiches, salads, and lube, the usual. You'll need to listen to learn more about that one. Anyway, we talk about her new book titled Simmering, a Kitchen Memoir, published by Unbound. Rebecca shares about her life as a food writer for Huffington Post and Savoir, as well as her journey to self-discovery all the way to Provincetown, where she now lives, cooks, and writes. Please enjoy this conversation with the lovely Rebecca Orchant. Okay, so this connection, Pop and Dutch, is the little sandwich shop and market that you and your husband own on Commercial Street in Provincetown.
Yep.
And as I was doing my research, there was some really funny, it's not just a market, it's not just a sandwich shop. You've really combined your love of all things, your love of adventure, of the unusual, kind of exploring different things. Tell me a little bit more about kind of the historical connection to New Mexico, to New York, to Pop and Dutch, and how it all came to be.
So I was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which basically half of this book takes place there and in this very strange suburb, Rio Rancho, of Albuquerque. Sean and I met in college at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. After both having gone to different places, I went to a school in New Jersey for a year. He went to SUNY Purchase for a year. We both thought we were going to be East Coast earlier than we were. So Sean was born in Bridgewater, lived there until he was 12, and then the whole family moved to Santa Fe. His dad got a job there. But they still spent their summers going to Cape Cod because that was their childhood. And that was mostly Chatham, where Sean's dad and stepmom actually live now in retirement. So the first time I ever came to Cape Cod, we went to Chatham, and it was look how lovely and quaint and manicured this is. But obviously that is not exactly my vibe. We found ourselves up in Provincetown quite a lot, just loving the culture and the nightlife and the people. And then shortly after my dad passed away in 2007, we spent a summer living in Jack and Beth's basement in Chatham. We worked at the Chatham Cookware, which is a sandwich shop on Main Street in Chatham, owned by this woman, Rebecca, who is amazing. And if we hadn't worked there, I don't know that Pop and Dutch ever would have existed. So after that summer, we moved to New York, which was kind of our grand plan the whole time. We were there for almost 7 years, and then kind of felt the call to do something of our own. We were both tangentially, well, Sean less tangentially than I was, working in food. I was writing about food for the Huffington Post, and Sean was managing this like really sweet hipster sandwich shop called Court Street Grocers in Brooklyn. And we knew that we wanted to have our own version of that, but not to do it in New York. And honestly, after Hurricane Sandy happened there, I was like, this is not a place that is prepared for disaster. I don't want to be in a city while this is going on. And we just thought, why don't we try to do this in a place where we can have some time off in the winter and go really hard in the summer? And we knew that if it was going to be on Cape Cod, it was going to be in Provincetown. That was pretty much it for us. So we just jumped into it. We quit our jobs in New York. We rented a commercial space. And the space that we rented has historically been the Provincetown General Store, which used to be called the Leather Deli because the guys who owned it and worked in it were like in full caps, chaps, vests, regalia all summer long. And it's like the last stop on your way out to Boy Beach. People cruise each other there. And, you know, when we took it over, we didn't want to lose that spirit of it. That part was really important to us. So that's why our motto is sandwiches, salads, and lube. And you can buy all of those things at Pop and Dutch.
I love that you have kept the culture, and a lot of times that goes away with a new owner. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that with it being authentic?
I think the thing that Provincetown really demands of you if you want to stay there and make a life there is that you are authentically yourself, no matter who that is. And that I was really drawn to Provincetown in particular because I saw other people doing that. And I say this in the book, but I stupidly didn't really realize that I was doing that for myself. So living in Provincetown has allowed me to be the queerest, loudest, most fully realized version of myself. And we sort of had a notion that was how it was going to be, but kind of like dipped our toes into the water. Like that was our slogan. We printed it on a tote bag. We were like, let's see if people go for it. And then it was like, oh yes, this is actually, you should, if you are going to own a business and it is going to represent you, you should tell the jokes that you would tell. It should say the words that you would say. And we've kind of stuck with that the whole time. And I feel very, very privileged to be doing it in a place that doesn't just tolerate it, but like really loves it and respects it.
I love that. So this connection with food and life. So food often serves as a metaphor in a lot of your writing. Beyond Pop and Dutch, you're also a writer and pretty experienced and successful publisher of a book just this past May called Simmering. So how do you use it to explore the themes like love and identity in your writing?
Whenever people ask me about my process, I have to confess that I am one of the least disciplined writers I've ever known. If I sit down and try to make myself do office hours of this many hours a day in writing, I will write the most boring shit that has ever come out of my brain. And I can really only do it successfully when like an idea just hits me like a bolt of lightning next to the head. And that's how I ended up writing most of this book. It's how I end up writing most of the newsletters that I write. And it was also the way that I ended up writing most of the articles for the Huffington Post that I wrote, which I think was sometimes great and sometimes not so great, if you ask my editor. But so I kind of can't write anything where food is not involved or present, because I feel like when I write about my life, when I remember stories from my life, it's always around a table. It's always too many people in the kitchen. It's always, where did we go to eat on that vacation where that fucked up thing happened? And that that texture is really important to me in other people's writing. I love to know what it smelled like and what you were eating and what the restaurant looked like that you were sitting in. And without those details, I find it hard to like connect to the story. So
Where do you think that comes from?
I was always around good food growing up. My parents were both great cooks and they really care about food.
Yeah.
And
Because I have to be honest, I am so intimidated. I love food. And I feel so much better when I eat good food, obviously, right? But I am so intimidated by food.
why? What do you mean?
I grew up with like meatloaf,
Sure.
Not good meatloaf, hot dogs, bologna, like very meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
And I discovered food very late in life. So this is so fascinating to me that whenever I hear people say I grew up with parents that were excellent cooks, I grew up with neighbors who were Italian that I would beg to eat over there. But anyway, back to so that connection with growing up with good food and like not being intimidated by that it's part of your story.
Yeah. I mean, I think I asked my mom if I could cook my first recipe all the way through by myself when I was like 5. And she definitely had to help me, but it was like, I just decided one of my dad's favorite foods was lentil soup, and it was his birthday, and I wanted to make this very specific recipe out of this very specific cookbook. And she was like, you don't know how to do any of this.
Yeah, you're going to hurt yourself.
But I just was like, show me how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think she was really excited about that because that was, I know that if my kid had asked me that, I would have been really excited about it. So that was a very bonding moment for us, and we have always connected over and around food since then. And I guess in moments of social awkwardness, feel like that is such an easy thing to bring people together around. Cooking food, serving people food, being in a place where you're ordering food. It just it's something we have to do to survive, but everyone does it a little bit different way. And I think that those differences are a really interesting point of inflection to look at how they make a person, I guess.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm not bologna. But
I love bologna. Don't knock bologna, okay? That is a wonder of science that we brought all of those pureed meats together and made them taste delicious with myrtle berries. That's crazy.
It is. Do you serve it at Pop and Dutch?
We do occasionally. We'll have it as a special. Sometimes we use mortadella, so it's like fancy bologna.
Okay, that's crazy. That's crazy.
But that's part of Pop and Dutch too. That's part of our story and our culture is that leaning into things that people would be tempted to describe as trash, but is actually just deep, deep comfort for people. That is as important as having a fine dining experience in a restaurant.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's interesting. I was talking to my daughter this morning about grilled cheese, and I said, I'm meeting Rebecca Orchant today, and she wrote this, I read this blog post, I believe it was in a blog post that really, it was a blog post that you were kind of reminiscing about your dad and, the things that you wish you could hear them say again, which was very thought-provoking for me. I've been thinking about that all day. And it was beautifully written. And one of the things that he used to make for you is grilled cheese. And in the morning for breakfast. And I do that. We do that at home for my daughter. And so I said to her, how do you feel about grilled cheese for breakfast? Do you think that's weird? And she's 16, She said, I don't think it's healthy. I think it's decadent. And I think it's good. Isn't that funny?
That's really funny.
She's like, it's a little greasy at times.
Yeah, that's what makes it delicious.
It's what makes it delicious. But it's I was thinking to myself after reading about your very descriptive, thoughtful, heart-wrenching, description of that, about making memories with food and just so curious. Like, it's almost like I wanted to rush her to like, what are you going to think about that when you're older? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
So the memoir includes some provocative elements of how you see food, sensuality, as they're interconnected. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, I really appreciate that part that it's so many artists, because I would consider you, do you consider yourself an artist?
Yeah.
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 You really have to know thyself, right? And going down to Provincetown and opening up a shop and then really getting infused and immersed in the culture of Provincetown, one could get lost and it might not be so pretty.
Yeah, lots of people do.
Yeah. But from reading about how you're navigating this, it's really like this grounding in self and through food.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more about like how it's all interconnected to this. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I think so.
Like your recipes that are associated with your blog posts and stuff like that.
I have always seen what happens at the kitchen table as an extension of the way that people really feel about themselves and each other. So before I was a food writer, I thought I was going to be a playwright. I got a dramatic writing degree in school. And I very famously love a scene where it all falls apart around the dinner table and like everyone just says what they've actually been thinking and meaning the whole time. Because that is such a gathering place and that is such a, eating dinner is something that you have to do to stay alive. You can romanticize it, but at the end of the day, that's really what it is. And when you do that ritualistically with people over and over again, I feel like you start to say what you mean and you start to be yourself. A lot of the like sexy or salacious parts of this book take place in kitchens. And that's not an accident. I just think like that's where we're honest with each other and that's where we're honest about what we want and what nourishes us and what we need. And I feel like when you extend those words like nourishing and need away from the refrigerator, you are still talking about the same feelings and the same requirements. You need things from people to nourish you. And I just think that they go together almost all the time.
Tell me more.
Well, there's a story in this book about a man that I dated in Provincetown for a while. This book also is my coming out as a polyamorous bisexual to the entire world, which has been so far mostly just really gratifying. Honestly, funnily enough, the most pearl-clutching reaction that I've gotten from folks about it has mostly been from cis gay men who have been in open relationships for like 30 years. They're always like, "You're what? You and Sean are what?" So anyway, there is a story about this man, Danielle, that I dated for a while, who continues to be one of my best friends. And one of the most memorable and wonderful romantic encounters I have ever had with him was one day in the summer. We were just like, we're going to spend time together. I'm too tired to cook food. I'll just go pick up takeout. And he was like, I'll take care of it, but I'm just going to make you something that I would just eat if I was home by myself. And I was like, yeah, okay, great. And I showed up. He's Belarusian. So I showed up, and that turned out to be a bag of frozen pork pelmeni from the freezer that he sauteed mushrooms and onions and tossed in sour cream and covered in a bunch of dill and just put this steaming bowl full of like straight up animalistic comfort in front of me. And I was like, oops, I'm in love with you. That's how this happens. That's how this happens.
There's nothing like salty meat.
Truly.
That brings people together. I I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so these experiences in the kitchen, because I think of you as both like a chef and a writer.
Yeah.
And someone kind of like really sharing, like, this is who I am. This is meaningful to me. What is, like, when you wrote the book, Simmering, what do you want people to get out of reading that? And what was it? Or maybe it was more for you.
That's a great question. Definitely aspects of both. Writing a memoir is not for the faint of heart. Sometimes it feels really cleansing and wonderful to get stuff out. And sometimes you're like just yanking it from your diaphragm, basically. Sean came downstairs once while I was working and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm sitting at the table sobbing about something that happened 25 years ago. I don't know why I'm doing this." But that's just part of doing like honest work when you're telling stories about yourself. And I guess what I hope that people get out of it, is kind of something that we were already talking about and a theme that has come up a lot in my life, which is just like a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Like you literally don't know what's going to happen in 5 minutes. And don't you want to have tried all the things you wanted to try, said all the things you wanted to say, eaten all the things you wanted to eat, gone all the places you wanted to go? Like, there is no fucking time to waste. You just have to go for it. And that means like completely disparate things to different people. But I feel like the constant in there are gathering experiences, gathering relationships, getting to know people, getting to know ourselves. Some of the most gratifying interactions I've had with people who have read the book afterwards is realizing that we have a shared experience that we didn't know about in the past. Be that, everyone loses someone close to them at some point in their lives, but until you've lost someone who's like really key to your DNA and existence, you don't really know what that feels like. And I always say it's a terrible club to be a part of, but that we're everywhere, and being able to offer people the kind of support and empathy that maybe you didn't get that first time around has been so gratifying and important to me.
Ooh, yeah. So what was the catalyst?
To write the book?
Well, I'm thinking about, living your authentic self and trying new experiences. What's the first step to that? Writing a book is not easy, and a memoir, no less. So do you think the experience of losing someone super, super close, part of your DNA, kind of was the catalyst for all these experiences and going for it, and a sense of urgency so that...
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. But not everyone does that. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
So like, what is that recipe? Was it Provincetown that brought it out? Yeah.
It's definitely, that the answer to that question would be so different for everyone, any
right?
person that you ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. I realized very shortly after losing my dad that I was getting catapulted into the rest of my life and that I needed to do it ASAP.
Tell me more about that. Catapulted. I know what you mean, but let's talk about it.
Yeah. I did it a little bit indelicately, to be honest.
Yeah.
I had never imagined that I was going to live in Albuquerque for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But also, I was in a really comfortable place right before he passed. Like, Sean and I were living in this kick-ass apartment that cost zero money. We had a great network of friends. We both had what we thought were like very grown-up jobs that definitely weren't. But we'd both just graduated from college. We were like making adult money and supporting ourselves and not freaking out about it, being able to like treat our friends to a round at the bar. It felt like we were living like kings, basically. And I do feel really lucky that I have come from an incredibly supportive home with like parents who I adore, I've never been a person who wants to like spend a lot of time with my family. Not that I don't like them, they're all just very annoying. But like I see people orient their lives around living close to their parents, and that was never something that I was thinking of when I was trying to figure out how I wanted to structure my life. I wanted to go do stuff and be out in the world. Part of that is probably because I am the firstborn double Aries, bullheaded psychopath. But I also come from parents who wanted me to go out and do shit and experience exactly what I wanted my life to be. And I wasn't really sure how I was going to do that or when I was going to do it or what the jumping off point was going to be. And my dad died very unexpectedly. And after that happened, I was like, oh, fuck, like, I don't have any time to waste. I got to go now. I got to just go. So he died in December of 2007. In May of 2008, Sean and I packed up all our shit, moved across the country, went to Cape Cod, and just started the next thing. And I have some regret about leaving things behind in Albuquerque abruptly in a way that now I probably wouldn't. You know, my little brother was only 16, and my mom, you know, she has always had a ton of friends. She has a wonderful network of people there, but I was thinking about what I needed in that moment and nothing else. And I would do it differently if I had to do it again today. But once I started, I kind of just couldn't stop. Then it was like, okay, we'll move to New York and we'll have whatever that dream is, because I still thought I was going to be a playwright and Sean still thought he was going to make movies. And then we found a whole other life and a whole other passion group there, and just it's been a really fun ride. But I feel like I do always have this like centrifugal force kind of behind me that's like, you gotta get the next thing. You gotta get the next thing.
I can relate to that. That catapulting, that, does it feel like flying by the seat of your pants sometimes?
Yeah, I'm definitely faking it a lot and just hoping that it works.
I have these conversations about, you know, you make a plan, you work the plan. And, you know, in my work, it's a lot like that. I'm sure with a book, like you have to make a plan and then you work the plan. But in life, you know, I feel like there are planners and then there are not planners. And being ready and open and available for wherever life takes you. You know, when you walked in the door, my colleague and I were like talking about, you know, you only live once, maybe, what if we don't? Okay, well, let's talk about that. You know, are you new to this world? So it's just so interesting to think about your choices, you know, to kind of override the program, being on that program.
Yeah. And I fear that makes me sound a lot braver and more impulsive than I really am, because I also classically overthink every possible angle of every possible situation. And if I were left to my own devices on that, would just be sitting in a puddle of possibilities.
Yeah.
And so there always has to be this moment where it's like, just make a choice.
Right.
Just decide and go with it. And if it gets fucked up along the way, figure out how to fix it.
It's just a balance.
Yeah. There's a thing that I say in here about how owning a restaurant is kind of like skydiving for the first time. You can read all about it. You can practice. You can gather as much information as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to just try it and either figure it out or die.
Right. Because you can't just sit and be paralyzed by your fear. You got to go for it. But having the analytical, like, okay, here are the
it's good
5
to know
worst
how to
things.
do it.
Yeah. I know. I love the passage that you read when we started about all the things that you needed to know, but you didn't know, when you start a business. And I know so many people do that. You get into it and you're like, wow, I didn't realize I was going to have to order, $10,000 in candy bars that will sit here, The thing that I admire about Pop and Dutch is this like connection to it is an artistic outlet as well as a market, right? So what's your advice on that? Like, how do you stay true to your artistic kind of perspectives and, tying it in with who you are? It's really interesting.
I think Sean and I are both creative-minded people at the root of it. He always claimed to not have any talent for visual art, and now he's like painting, and there's something in there. I think that what we have done at Pop and Dutch is shrugged off the notion that when you walk into a business that sells hipster sandwiches, it should have white subway tile on the wall and look like every other restaurant that sells hipster sandwiches. And really, when you walk through Pop and Dutch and look at the driftwood and like art and ephemera and shit that we have on the walls, that's like, it's a reflection of what we care about and who we are and what we think is cool and what we like. And it also really helps if most of the people who you hire to work in your sandwich shop are weird artists, because those people pass the time by making weird art, and then you have extra weird art to put everywhere. And it's kind of like the ethos of that place is just like, what kind of weird joke are we going to tell today while we make another turkey sandwich?
Oh, I love that. That's important to have.
It is.
Be surrounded. I love what you mentioned about Sean saying that he couldn't paint, now he's painting. Do you often have like as a writer, did you feel like, okay, I got this story to tell, I got to get it out?
Yeah.
And so like, what was your process of like, why did you think you could write a book?
So this again comes back to my mom and dad. My mother is a visual artist. She has worked with basically every medium you could possibly imagine in my life. She's made jewelry. She's done like incredibly large scale paintings, installation work, and now she's a silk artist. She paints on silk. And my dad, who spent his entire career working for software companies and putting out fires and being a manager, basically, was a writer and a really talented writer, and a very voracious reader. So I just got both of those two people smashed into my brain at the same time. And I learned to read very young because it was a priority for them, which I'm so grateful for. I read a lot when I was a kid, and I journaled a ton when I was a kid. Reading,
do you still?
Yeah, but I let other people read it. It's less interior. It's less for me, and it's more like there's this thing going on within me that I want to work out on the page, and then I'm going to send it out into the world and see if other people feel that way too, kind of.
Okay.
So I started writing stories when I was really young, and I always loved writing classes. I loved English classes. Maybe not all of the reading always, but my main means of expression was always to write stuff down. When I was younger, I would get really flustered and jumbled, and it would, especially if I was upset or I needed to tell someone something hard, I would have to write it down because I just organize my thoughts better on paper than I do out loud. And then that just kind of became a habit. It was like, oh, this feels really good. And once I've put it down on paper, I don't have to hold it in my brain anymore. So it's out of there, and I don't have to try to remember it or tumble it over and over and over again. So I started doing that, and then my dad was very much on the Web 2.0 forefront, and he was on the vanguard of blogging and was obsessed with blogging. So that got incorporated into my practice really early on. I had a really dumb, embarrassing like blog spot when I was a teenager, which I hope no one ever sees. And as I became an adult and moved through the world, writing was just always something that I knew I was going to do. And I didn't know exactly what form it was going to take. Like I said, I thought I was going to be a playwright.
Yeah.
I did write a couple of plays, which I loved. And then I decided I didn't really want to work with actors for the rest of my life. So I just kind of turned more to memoir type work.
Yeah.
I decided when I decided I wanted to write about food, I thought, like, I want to work for Gourmet Magazine. You know, that was the kind of food writing I thought I wanted to do, which, unfortunately for me, is a kind of food writing that doesn't exist that much anymore.
Yeah.
So when I got that job at the Huffington Post, that was, like, my dream job. I was so excited. And it was so much fun for a while. But it's also, you know, by the time I got hired there, I was 28. Most of the people around me were like 22 and 23. I already felt old. They were all moving so much faster than I was. And the kinds of things I wanted to write about were not, you know, that was the era of the like BuzzFeed food, clickbait, viral quiz about what kind of food you would be if you were a fruit or whatever. That stuff didn't interest me. I wanted to spend like 3 days working on a piece about the way people make funeral food for their families, you know? And like, I think that my editor, to her credit, was great and wanted to have a lot of that stuff, but also that's a, you know, corporate engine. So I was grateful to have the experience. I'm so glad I did it. And I love being able to do it on my own timeline instead. So in 2020, my friend Flynn and I started this newsletter called Soup and Despair. And we were kind of doing it weekly during the pandemic because we had a lot of time to sit around and think about both of those things.
Yeah.
And the way that the book came about is that one of my regulars from Pop and Touch had started a publishing company called Unbound Edition Press. His name's Patrick Davis. He reached out to me and said, I love this newsletter. I'm looking for a food book for the imprint. I don't want it to be a cookbook. Do you think you have a book in you about this? And I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I do.
And we just went from there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What kind of feedback are you getting?
It's been so far really great.
Yeah.
And I think that part of that is because right now the reach is kind of small. You know, it's mostly people who know me, come into the sandwich shop, see me in town, people who I've had interactions with through my career out in the world. I think once it gets into the hands of people who have no idea who I am and have never met me, then like it's going to get a little more interesting and a little scarier probably.
Right.
But so far it's just been like, I had no idea you could do this. And I actually, my honestly very, very, very favorite piece of feedback that I got was from Daniil after he read it, which I was a little bit nervous about because I did not change anyone's names in this book. The people whose names don't get mentioned in the book are meant to be forgotten about. I hope they fade into obscurity. But
so there.
Daniil very much is called by name. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, I've known you for so many years. You're one of my closest friends. I feel closer to you than most people I have ever known. And I didn't know any of this shit. Like, it's so amazing to just give people a handbook to who you are and how you got there. And I didn't really think that that's what I was doing while I was writing it, but he's right. This is me. Like, this is where I came from. And it's amazing to be able to hold it and watch people read it and not have to repeat myself.
Right. Oh, wow. I don't know if many people could handle that.
It's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone.
That's for sure. That's
fascinating.
For sure. But I could say that about a lot of things in my life.
Of course. Of course. That is fascinating. A handbook. So do you feel that, like, this is like getting a tattoo?
Which I also have a lot of.
Maybe a tattoo on your face. Because once it goes out there, that's it.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt like, oh, this is me, but I've changed since? Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. Because that's just the nature of a static work, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're all works in progress. And the hardest thing about the hardest part of the process for me in writing a memoir was deciding when to stop.
Right.
Like,
you're still so young.
It's still good. Like, it's all
Yeah.
still going. I could just keep going.
Right.
So, like, how do you decide this is the end of this particular part of the story? And I didn't really figure out, like, a high-level philosophical answer to that question. I just was like, well, this happened yesterday, so I guess
Like, it feels right now. Yeah.
we'll just stop. And then it'll be a completed story because we said so. We said the end,
That's right.
you know?
That's the end for now.
And that's kind of, when it, like, bringing it back to the way that Pop and Dutch functions, how it looks inside, the way we, like, message, that's sort of become a very important theme of my adult life. It is like this because I said so. I just want it to be like this. So this is it. And if you are into it, great. And if not, there's another book on the shelf next to it, and there's another sandwich shop down the street. It's liberating.
Oh, I'm going to, like, think about that. This is very inspiring. So what's next for you?
Definitely more writing.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of projects percolating right now.
Like fiction or based on real life?
Fiction is harder for me. I feel like having to invent a whole world is a really particular talent that I've done it in the past, but it doesn't call to me as much. My editor and I have talked about I'd really love to curate and edit a collection of essays and poems about food and sex.
Ah, yeah.
So that's coming.
Yeah, that's a good Christmas gift.
Yeah, definitely.
Like with recipes and positions? Like, what would that look like?
The wonderful thing about that is that it's kind of like up to the people who are writing the things that are in it.
Right.
So this memoir for me, people often call it a cookbook, which I think is really funny because it's definitely not a cookbook. But it does have recipes in it, and that throws people for a loop. They're not sure how to, like, make that work in their head. I just read more MFK Fisher than one person possibly should. So that, to me, this is a perfectly normal book. But I think that the themes of food and sex are so often tied together because both of those things are, like, for most people, basic human requirements. But the way that we engage in satisfying both of those needs is fundamentally different depending on every person's life experience. So, like, I think it's not uncommon. It doesn't confuse me that people often are experiencing both of those things at the same time. And I think that writing about both of those things at the same time is really hot and really fun. And I want to read more of it, so I'm going to ask people to write more of it.
Oh, I'm gonna think about that. That's like, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to talk about? We didn't even talk about burlesque.
Yeah, speaking of just doing it.
Yeah, like, do you just make a list, or is it like, I'm gonna just, something pops up and you're like, oh, I'd like to try that?
Kind of. I mean, I had a lot of theater and dance training as a kid, obviously, and have always gravitated towards women being sexy and feeling their sexuality on stage. So I started my burlesque career at 38, 2 years ago, partially because a friend of mine in town, who is this glorious drag queen named Mackenzie, was walking down the street with someone I had not met before named Spooky. And they said, we're starting a burlesque show in Provincetown. Would you ever want to do a number? And I was like, why would you think of me for that? And Mackenzie was like, well, you're sexy as hell, and it just seems like something that you would want to do. And I was like, yeah, like yesterday. It's something I've always wanted to do. I like imagined that I would be good at it, but I had never tried it because no one had ever given me the space to do it, or, you know, like
You need the opportunity.
in New York, that's a hard thing to get into.
Yeah.
You have to like really be put together, I feel like, to have that opportunity there. So to be able to just kind of fumble through it as a dummy who had never done it before, I was so grateful for that opportunity. And I just experience unbridled joy while I'm doing it. So my burlesque name is the Duchess of Sandwich, which several people in town have confessed to me they thought is because I'm from Sandwich and I was just coming to Provincetown from Sandwich. I was like, you guys, why is that funny? That's not.
And you'd only get that if you're from the Cape and you know that there's a town named Sandwich.
Yeah. It is so much fun to take your clothes off on a stage in front of like 300 strangers. I mean, talk about liberating. It's like, it's just a blast to like bring people joy with your joy is so cool.
That's very cool.
So yeah, if anyone has just a thought that that's even something you would want to try, I really can't recommend it enough. I love it.
Do you still do it?
Yeah.
Do you have a show coming up?
As a matter of fact, I do. I am hosting Helltown Burlesque on December 7th at 9 p.m. in Provincetown at the Post Office Cafe and Cabaret. That is my friend Spooky's show, who I get to guest host for.
Love it.
It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a really good one.
Anything else that we didn't talk about?
I don't know. I think we
Do we cover everything?
really hit it.
Well, we'll have to do the next memoir
Would love to.
2.0, which should be interesting.
Yeah, just gotta go like live a little bit more in the world.
Yeah. Go live a little bit more and come back. All right. Rebecca, thank you for coming here and talking to me about your book. And where can people buy it?
It is available everywhere you can buy books on the internet.
Perfect.
If you buy it from Amazon, Jeff Bezos personally comes to my house and takes $2 out of my wallet. So use bookshop.org or something else. It's also in the Provincetown Bookshop at East End Books in Provincetown. And I think also in a couple of other shops on the Cape, but I'm not sure exactly which ones.
Okay. Well, best of luck with the book.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time here.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me. This is called Provincetown. They spelled it wrong. Although they were the namesake of our restaurant, I never got to meet Pop and Dutch. And actually, even though they were Sean's great-grandparents, neither did he. A caveat, right out of the gate, we spelled it wrong. That's what Sean's grandmother Lorraine said when she came to our shop for the first and only time on our very first opening day. Lorraine, who lived to be 99, still had a freakishly sharp memory. The last time we saw her, she spent the entire visit complaining about the portion sizes of the food in her assisted living facility. The chocolate pudding is the size of a thumbnail. The menu choices. I don't care for a sandwich at Subway. And pointing out which bouquets of birthday flowers in her room had been sent by whom and how well she thought they had done, respectively. When Lorraine crossed the threshold of Pop and Dutch that day in 2014 to deliver us a good luck potted gladiola, wish us well, and review our rendition of her snickerdoodle cake recipe, it's fine. She may have just thought we were being careless with the details. The details, to be fair, were a little sparse. According to Lorraine, when Sean and his siblings were born, she asked Pop and Dutch if they'd like to meet their great-grandchildren, and their response was, and I very much suspect she was paraphrasing, not particularly. The story of their nicknames as I know it is that Dutch, Lorraine's mother-in-law, was called that because she nicknamed herself Duchess. The legend being that she preferred to wear elbow-length evening gloves whenever she could and aspired to a station higher than her own. Pop, who was actually Dutch's brother, not her husband, had come back to live with her and help with the kids after she kicked their father, Eric, out of the house for too much gin, not enough patience, a hot temper, and cruel hands. As opposed to Dutch's aspirations for high society, Pop, a lifelong bachelor as the saying used to go, drank Ballantine ale, was fond of tinned sardines straight from the can, and smoked Pall Malls. We have a picture of them on the lawn of their summer home in Manamet, Massachusetts, with Lorraine, then in her 20s, holding both their hands, the blonde hair she still had until the day she died glimmering in the sun. Dutch very much wanted to be classy. Pop preferred to remain otherwise, and we've tried to incorporate both of their spirits into the sandwich shop and market we bestowed with their names. Both Sean and I always loved the way their names sounded together, and we loved the homage to a non-traditional family and all its imperfect weirdness. We also knew that Pop and Dutch, spelled D-U-C-H, wouldn't quite register in the public consciousness. As it was, the boys of Provincetown began referring to our shop, I like to think lovingly, as the poop and douche before our first summer was over. So we added the erroneous T to try to save ourselves from ridicule. We didn't realize then how many actual Dutch tourists would subsequently run into the shop expectantly, wondering who was Dutch and if we made Dutch food. We didn't set out to disappoint the people of the Netherlands, but a few have certainly left our shop crestfallen. As anyone who has ever started a business can tell you, the spelling of the name is one of roughly 70,000 details you didn't think of when you were dreaming it up. While Sean and I walked up and down the streets of Brooklyn fantasizing about aguas fresca flavors, sat in pubs poring over possible breakfast menus, and spent feverish weeks trying to time our resignations from our jobs in New York with the pending acceptance of a commercial lease in Provincetown, we didn't know we'd have to submit sign dimensions to the town to get our business license. We didn't know we'd need to become experts on what kind of flooring is easiest to install in a building that tilts constantly backward towards the bay and contains not one single right angle. We didn't know, and this one was really a bitch, how hard it is to find a plumber on Cape Cod in April. If you've never been to Provincetown, here's what you need to know. It's one of the most beautiful, absurdly cute seaside villages I've ever been to, filled with visitors who are hell-bent on indulging every decadence they can think of. They want to eat, they want to drink, they want to fuck, they want to dance, they want to lounge on the beach, they want to buy shit with Provincetown printed on it more than you could possibly believe. Mostly, they want to be all the way themselves, which is the real reason that people end up here.
Oh, that is Provincetown in a nutshell.
I tried to make it so, yeah.
It's so, I just wanted to listen to the whole, could you read me the whole book? Because
hopefully someday there will be an audiobook, yes.
If you connect with this podcast, please subscribe, share, or leave a review. Thanks for listening. This podcast is produced by the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, edited and mixed by Jay Sheehan of Garrett Audio.